It is truly an honor to welcome the Ambassador of India to the United States, Ms. Meera Shankar. It's a pleasure to welcome you. Madam Ambassador, I want to start with the newly created synergies between India and US. In this current economic crisis, India is doing fairly well, and I feel this is a great time to leverage the resources between both the countries. And as an ambassador, you have an important role to play. I wanted your take on that.
I think it's a very good time. The Indian economy has shown maturity, and we have withstood the global economic crisis relatively well. Our growth rates last year were 6.7%. This year it's poised to be between 6 to 6.5%. But we are seeing a phenomenal rebound, for instance, in industrial production. And we've seen that in June this year, industrial growth was about 8%. Again in July, it was 6.7%. I think figures for August are again something like 9% in many of the industries. So we are seeing a rebound in growth. And I'm confident that the Indian economy will get back to a growth path of 8 to 10%, which is the objective that we have set for ourselves as a nation. Beyond achieving high growth, we think that we need to be active in ensuring that this growth is inclusive and that our people are empowered to take advantage of the opportunities that are there. So I think that the opportunities for collaboration are very many. India is an exciting market to invest in. You can look at technology collaborations. In fact, the US is the largest source of technology collaborations for Indian companies. You can look at joint ventures in India. You can look at participating in some way in the whole educational reform program, the many new institutions that we are opening up, where clearly we are going to be short of faculty because it's such a huge expansion of the higher education system at one go. Beyond that, we have the whole skill development mission. And clearly, India is emerging as a hub both for R&D outsourcing by major companies and moving up the value chain in terms of going beyond software to also engineering, design, and services, also to biotech, bioinformatics. So the range of areas in which Indian R&D is emerging as competitive is growing. Many IITians are looking at their own startups in India, leveraging the cost and skill advantages of India to enhance their competitiveness as startup companies within the US economy. So I think there's a range of areas in which we can leverage the skill and the entrepreneurship that IITians represent and the opportunities and requirements of the Indian economy and polity.
In the recent time, there have been certain challenges where, the world is opening up to each other in a global economy. There are certain concerns, especially from the Indian quarters. IITians and other entrepreneurs have done so amazingly well in these countries that the US government needs to open up a bit more to accommodate. So what are your perspective?
Certainly, I think that particularly at a time of global recession, it's all the more important that economies remain open. We've seen the mistakes of the Great Depression, where the Great Depression was exacerbated by the tit-for-tat protectionism that different countries undertook. And I think if countries are to pull themselves out of this, remaining open to trade and investment is a very important element. Clearly, the US has benefited from the India connection. A study by the CII and the India Brand Equity Foundation shows that just in 2-3 years, the India connection or the economic relationship with India added value of more than $103 billion to the US economy by way of the goods that India purchased, by way of the investments which flowed from India and Indian companies to the US economy, and by way of the synergies that US companies used to enhance their own global competitiveness. So it's a two-way street.
My final question is about the Indians and the Indian entrepreneurship here in this country, especially in Silicon Valley. They have been role models and ambassadors from India, have done amazingly well. How do you think individuals like you and countries like India could leverage their networks, their resources to enhance, not just India's image in this country but throughout the world?
I think that this, the success of the overseas Indian community has been a very important element in reshaping India's image globally. From a kind of cliche where they saw India as a kind of exotic but extremely poor country, we have now shifted to the other cliche of India as a country of techies. And I think that the success of Indian technical and scientific migrants overseas has been one of the key factors in reshaping this image. So clearly, I think using the networks that Indian scientists and experts have built overseas would add enormous value to India's relationships, and also expand the realm of collaboration. To give you an example, the first companies from the US who began to look at India as a base for IT essentially were influenced by the fact that they had hired people from the IITs here and or other universities in India. And when they saw that these people were skilled, hardworking, good, could deliver, they said, well, there may be many more of them in the country from where they came. And because these Indian experts and scientists and engineers had their own connections back home, they also looked at India. And I think this was a very important factor in enabling the relationship in the services sector to take off. And that was the first sector. I have to recall when I was here as Minister for Commerce at the Indian Embassy, 1991 to 95, we had India as the partner country for the first time for the Comdex Fair, which was in Chicago. Even though Comdex is hardware and we don't really produce hardware, we thought this would be an opportunity to showcase India's software skills and to establish the networks. Then when we set up the India-US Business Alliance with 10 CEOs on either side, and then they were to interact with the commerce ministers, we held the first event in California, and about 200 software companies participated in that event, including a very large number of startups which had really people of Indian origin, either as employees or as owners. And at that time, I remember one newspaper critically commenting, oh, what's all the fuss about? Our software exports are only $200–300 million. And we felt at that stage, and there was a study also from the World Bank, that the potential was something like $2 billion in about 2–3 years, that we could ramp it up if we did the right things, including setting up VHF communications, which we did. And then we also were able to put in place the tax breaks to treat these as deemed exports, services exports as deemed exports, just on par with export of goods. And this whole framework then provided the catalyst for this area to take off. So I'm using that as an example. We can replicate it in many more areas.
Madam Ambassador, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Welcome. Thank you.